Jane Holland, costume designer for Cowboy Bebop, coming to Netflix in November. A ragtag crew of bounty hunters chases down the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. They'll save the world for the right price. Jane, this show is obviously based on a legendary anime series of the same name. When you were brought on to be the costume designer, I guess, where did you start to do the live action version and come up with the looks of the characters, for the adaptation?
Well, I have to say that I hadn't seen the anime, so I came in fresh, which is kind of good. The first thing that I like to do is to read a script for just the script without having to, having other sort of noise in my head from something else. So I read the script cold. It was great. Like it's written with such great energy and really cool turns of phrase. And so, that really interested me. And then from there, I looked at the anime and my gosh, it opened a world to me. It's just such a cool storytelling, there's this kind of crazy kind of action that then sort of like suddenly sort of turns into some kind of like surreal moment. And, there's sort of like really breaks a lot of conventions and that amazing soundtrack. So, there was sort of just, it was easy for me really as soon as I sort of seen that source material to really, really be interested in doing this project. The creative scope of it is something quite extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. I guess picking back off of what you just said there, I guess like the show has so many fans. Obviously, like I myself also was not super familiar with the anime project, but I'd heard of it, of course. And I was just like, obviously the fans have such they have an expectation of what the characters maybe would look like. I guess for you as a costume designer, how do you make sure you're like, obviously like making your own imprint on the costumes while at the same time maybe, making sure that it is in keeping with what maybe longtime fans of the property would want to see?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and also with just such rich source material. So it really was something that we referenced a lot. But I guess the whole spirit of the series, and also because you're switching from anime to live action, there's a whole lot of stuff that comes with that springboards you into another world. So there's a lot of world building to do. There's a whole kind of re-looking at things. All of the proportions and shapes are quite different with human beings. There's a really sort of strong design process that you go through to try and get the essence and the sort of real feel and intention of characters that are in the anime that then kind of extrapolate and move and expand. So it's kind of like a springboard rather than being a slave to the anime. But, just a wealth of material. There's just such a mixture of stuff in there that is really cool. There's the Japanese style of storytelling. There's a really strong sort of Asian aesthetic that runs through. And then this harvesting of Americana and amazing sort of like just depth of music references. So there's a lot of stuff to get your ideas going and then sort of draw the threads together. So yeah, in terms of fans, I can't sort of predict what people are going to, how they're going to react. I just, sort of put everything that I can into it, have the best of intentions and really try and sort of make it as complex and, sort of depth and kind of interest, for people to find new things in it. There's a lot of detail that I hope will become as intriguing and, will kind of just build in this extrapolation of the world rather than a literal representation of the anime.
Yeah, you mentioned like a couple of things in there. You mentioned the scope of it and the depth of the Americana, I think you called it. I've been watching the show. It's like, to me, I was like, it's like, you're picking up like Western iconography or like dystopian science fiction, film noir, obviously. I guess as a costume designer, can you talk about like how exciting that is to get to blend those genres all in the same show, and like with the same characters even? I think it's just such a great, mix.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, we called it mashup. You know, there's this real mashup in there. I mean, I call it the bebop twist. That I was always looking for the bebop twist for everything. But really, I think the thing that anchored it for me was just, you know, sort of was bebop itself, like looking at bebop, the movement of bebop, what that jazz movement was, which was sort of like breaking restraint. It was kind of new ways of doing things. It was sort of like a real freedom and improvisation. So it's like, you know, that musical reference was something that I found really kind of anchored it, and that gave me something to understand. And the other thing that I kind of found really useful is, you know, there's sort of like something to do with a lot of, you know, sort of Japanese design and that is kind of like bringing different threads together. I mean, if you look at, you know, Japanese fashion design or Japanese tailoring, there's often sort of, you know, some kind of break of convention or some kind of really interesting quirk to it that is, you know, because there is this kind of like mixture of culture. So those are things that I found really valuable and really useful. And it's almost like sort of like finding a discord, but then finding the twist that kind of makes it sing. That's kind of how I felt about a lot of it. It's quite retro in lots of ways, you know. I mean, the feel of the anime has this retro feel. So, you know, in the background particularly, you know, I used a lot of vintage stuff, but I didn't stay in an era. It was a matter of, you know, sort of taking different things, putting them together, and then kind of just finding that thing that made it sing. Really fun, lots of fun.
Yeah, the background where it's like the world looked, like you said before, the world building is so big and the show has got such a massive scope. It does feel like, you know, when they're popping around to different locations and stuff, it just does feel like it's so built out based on like you said, like the background actors and everybody in their costumes. It really looks like they're in these places because of that. And I think it's like really a tribute to your work there. Are you talking about the characters? I mean, Spike Spiegel obviously has such like a great look, and the John Cho is so awesome on show, and I just love his headphones. Can you talk a little about like finding like the, you know, like getting the right look for his character and like the headphone, like the whole thing, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, it's such a kind of core, obviously, that the character of Spike Spiegel, and you know, I mean, it's a signature costume. So a signature costume has to do a lot of work, and you know, he sort of like has this kind of like really kind of nonchalant sort of street style, like really kind of cool, like this sort of really cool energy. But then he'll kind of go into some kind of crazy fight with high kicks and spins and what have you. So, you know, that suit had to do a lot of work. Also, it's pretty kind of unusual when you actually start drilling down into what it is in the anime. It's a single lapel. It's kind of got a bit of a crossover at the front. There's little tabs that tie it. There's sort of a bit of an Asian feel to it, but there's kind of quite an 80s feel to it. So really it was sort of finding a way into it. And basically, you know, it's a double-breasted suit that's kind of like a really slim cut and tailored, like just tailored. Yeah, and the lapel just has this sort of like wonderful little flick where it kind of disappears from the lapel and then sort of like, you know, to form that single lapel. That kind of detail was just it was sort of a way of finding something that actually really worked as a garment and a style. And, you know, John has a lot to do with that. Fabric choice, but tailoring and also detail. Like, you know, we, I had a jeweler and, you know, we made the buttons. The buttons have got the kanji symbol for water engraved in them because water is part of the Spike sort of character backstory. It's kind of part of his fight style, fight like water. There's sort of it's an analogy or a metaphor that kind of runs through. So there's details like that. And trophy buckles, because it's Cowboy Bebop, it was like, okay, you know, my thing is going to be trophy buckles. So we kind of created like fine jewellery, trophy buckles for a number of the characters that kind of encompassed that sort of, you know, metaphor for their character. So his has got that same kanji symbol for for water, but then it's got like a Japanese wave. So it's got this powerful imagery, quite beautiful. And then the lining, which is secret, it's only the actor really knows. You never see the lining probably, or the pattern is so small you wouldn't see what it is. But the lining is printed with like tiny roses that are falling through the lining, and the rose is a metaphor that runs right through the anime, and it's so symbolic of his heartbreak and his lost love. So that's kind of wrapped around him. So I kind of tried to find depth and bring depth to something that he had to wear every day, and that sort of has to go right through this world in all these different environments, and sort of like something that that could respond to all the challenges of the practicalities of filming.
Yeah, it's really great. Cowboy Bebop coming to Netflix in November. Jane Holland, thank you so much.
Thank you.